Now, this is about the most sane thing that somebody has said in concerning this discussion that I've had in a very long time. Also, can't both be true at the same time. The slave trade and those who are already here. To a certain extent, you are absolutely correct. And this is what I try to get across to people who come at me with this mentality is that when the colonizers first got here, they brought over initially the indentured servants from Europe. They brought over criminals from Europe. They treated them with the 7 years of Jubilee. But then they tried to enslave the Native Americans. They had two major problems, though. One, if a Native American were to escape, the other native tribes would hide them and keep them and fight for them because they also were easy. It also was easier for them to escape because they knew the land, and when they did get within another native tribe, they looked like them. So it was easy. It was harder for them to figure them out. The second part that made it hard for them to enslave the indigenous people is because the indigenous people of America did not have the ability to withstand the the diseases that came with the Europeans. You see, Europeans had already been through the Black Plague and smallpox and all these other things, which had never reached the native population here, mainly because they were so sparse, they didn't have as much contact, so they didn't go through these mass plagues. So these plagues devastated the Native American population all throughout the North, South, Central America, in the islands, devastated them. But a group of people who had somewhat immune systems towards that and who were easily identified if they ran away were the Africans. And so in 1819 is when they brought the first Africans over from the Europeans brought the first Africans over. That began the transatlantic slave trade instead of the trans-Mediterranean slave trade, which was them taking Africans in the 1500s into Europe and started bringing Africans to the Americas. Before 1619, they did try to enslave the indigenous people. But those indigenous people were decimated. 70 to 90% of their population was decimated. Mathematically, it is impossible for that group of people to have recovered in 200 years to be the number of around 4 to 6 million black population in America by that time frame. This is why they also inbred with Caucasians and Africans, because their population was dying due to all the diseases. So you are correct. But as many people who are claiming indigenous heritage, they might have a small amount, not enough to be recognized, but they may have a small amount. But for the most part, most of us have none. Absolutely none. It is the mentality that they put in our minds that Africa was some horrible place that we try to run from it instead of recognizing true history and what was going on. Africa was not horrible until the Europeans got there. Not saying Africa was peaches and cream either. They had their wars, they had their issues, they had their warlords, they had their tyrants, they had everything that every other culture has. The only thing they didn't have was the higher levels of technology because they didn't have a need for it. When your land has all the resources that you need, you don't have to invent things. You don't have to get on boats and sail for long trades because the land provided. The European landmass doesn't provide much of nothing, not enough for its population at that time frame. So they had a need, a desire, and we know that necessity is the mother of all inventions. The Native Americans, the indigenous people, the land provided. They didn't have a need for all these things. Plus, many people don't realize they didn't have horses. So without horses, that connection of peoples was not there as it was in Europe and Asia. So therefore, they didn't have that. Didn't have that in Africa either. That's why they didn't have those connections either. But that's just additional information. But to the main point, to a certain extent, both is true. But nowhere near as many people who are born and raised in America today have indigenous people bloodlines. If you do, it may be one person here or there, but not enough to make you indigenous. So you have a great day. And remember always, you got to free yourself to be yourself because your greatness is non negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.